Welcome to another Fidelity Charitable podcast. I'm Amy Perozolo, Head of Marketing, and I'm here with Jacob Clauson, Director of Compliance and an Officer of the Fidelity Charitable Board of Trustees. Jacob, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Today we're here to talk about some commonly asked questions donors have when supporting their favorite charities from a donor-advised fund. But before we dive into that, can you give us a little bit of background on Fidelity Charitable?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Fidelity Charitable is a 501c3 public charity that sponsors one of the nation's largest donor-advised fund programs. It's a pretty simple concept. Donors make an irrevocable, tax-deductible contribution to Fidelity Charitable to establish their donor-advised fund, which we call a giving account. Donors can then recommend how their contributions are invested and recommend grants to IRS-qualified public charities.
That's great. How many charities have donors supported?
While using their giving accounts, donors have supported more than 270,000 charities, with more than $35 billion in grants recommended from their donor-advised funds.
Wow, that's incredible. And is there a lot of variety in those charities?
Yes, absolutely. Grant recipients range from well-recognized national charities to smaller, locally known public charities and houses of worship. Because Fidelity Charitable is cause-neutral, we make grants to a wide range of charitable organizations at the recommendation of our donors. Fidelity Charitable does not limit grant-making based on an organization's specific charitable activities, geographic or demographic criteria, or based on political, religious, or philosophical grounds.
So what's the normal process of recommending a grant look like for a donor?
Good question, Amy. A donor can submit a grant recommendation of $50 or more via our website, iPhone app, or by calling our service team. Grant recommendations are then reviewed by Fidelity Charitable to ensure they meet our program guidelines. If they're approved, the grant is issued by check or EFT with a letter that provides the charity with Fidelity Charitable's grant terms, the donor's recommended use of the grant, and a donor acknowledgement if disclosed by the donor. We generally complete our review of a grant recommendation in 2 to 10 business days, but additional time may be required depending on the complexity.
Great. So you mentioned that grant recommendations are only approved if they comply with the program guidelines, though. So can you tell us a little bit more about those guidelines?
Sure. Under our policies, which are established by the Fidelity Charitable Board of Trustees, Fidelity Charitable conducts a robust review of each grant recommendation to ensure 3 key things. First, grants are made only to IRS-qualified public charities. Second, those public charities use granted funds solely for proper charitable purposes. And then third, that grants do not provide impermissible benefits to a donor or any other person. Fidelity Charitable does not make grants if, for example, an organization may be engaged in illegal or non-charitable activities, such as terrorism, money laundering, hate crimes, or fraud. But ultimately, our review process is in place to ensure we maintain the integrity of Fidelity Charitable's grant-making program, and that grants are going to support proper charitable purposes. This is why, among other reasons, Fidelity Charitable reserves the right to perform additional due diligence, or even to decline to make a grant recommended to a charitable organization.
That's great to know we have such a robust review process in place. But what resources are you actually using to conduct that review of those grant recommendations?
Good question. We use a number of resources. We've verified public charity status with the IRS, which is the U.S. government agency responsible for determining which organizations qualify, as an initial step in our review process. In addition, we review the grant recommendation and the grantee organization to ensure granted funds will be used for a proper charitable purpose and that there are no improper benefits connected to the grant. We do this by taking into consideration data from a variety of sources, including IRS records, public records such as litigation and governmental proceedings, news reports, and information provided by donors and charities themselves, and more. If there's an indication a grant may not be used for charitable purposes, we'll decline to make the grant, but we will make efforts to educate our donors to avoid future issues with their grant recommendations.
That's great that we provide the donor with so much due diligence. I know for me as a donor, that really kind of gives me peace of mind. What other resources do we have available to donors to help them achieve their philanthropic mission?
Well, going back to Fidelity Charitable being cause-neutral, we don't endorse specific charities, but we do provide numerous resources on our website that can help donors make informed giving decisions and find charities whose missions align with their philanthropic goals.
That's great. Thank you, Jacob. So we've covered a lot of information. Can you summarize it in a couple of quick points for us?
Sure. I think a key concept to leave with here is that Fidelity Charitable is here to help donors achieve their philanthropic missions, but also to maintain the integrity of Fidelity Charitable's grant-making program by making grants only for charitable purposes. We encourage all of our donors to proactively research charities before recommending a grant. Further, we encourage anyone who has concerns about a specific charity to contact the IRS and state charity regulators such as the Attorneys General, with their concerns. Everyone can play a part in ensuring funds are used for proper charitable purposes.
I agree, Jacob, and that is really sound advice. We've been talking today to Jacob Clauson about some of the commonly asked questions around donors supporting their charities from a donor-advised fund. You can find more information on this or other topics at fidelitycharitable.org. Thanks, Jacob.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Amy Peroslo. Thank you for listening.